to rephrase something you said, Ilan, about how kind of prescient Orwell was in presenting this blueprint, the way I'd put it is that he saw the essence of totalitarianism. And that is just pure psychopathy.
Hello and welcome back to another Mind Matters show, everybody. This week we're going to be talking about a film that is based on the 1948, 1949, depending on where you read it, published book by George Orwell called 1984. And in 1984, filmmaker Michael Radford wrote and directed a version of this prescient novel that we got to rewatch last night, and just wow is all I have to say. Well, I have a lot more to say actually about it, but let me start. Let me start with wow first, because I had read the novel a few decades before and had seen the film at least 25 years ago, and having rewatched it yesterday, and with all of the kinds of events and developments that we're seeing unfold in the past few years, especially, and reading so many articles where observers and analysts were making mention of 1984 to help explain the types of abuses of language, references to the eradication of history, the various ways in which totalitarianism is being seen to emerge, particularly in the West. To see the film again and to recognize how insightful Orwell was, and how insightful the filmmaker Michael Radford was in adapting the novel, which is keeps very close to the spirit of the book, was quite profound. It wasn't just one or two or three things that were on point. It was 20 things. It was dialogue coming out of the mouths of the characters. It was the deep-spirited sentiment of those who were part of the party of Ingsoc, or English socialism, the totalitarian future vision that Orwell could see, even just living through post-war England in the 40s and 50s. That came to fruition and realization in this story. So there are many things to unpack about this one film. If you've seen it a long time ago or have read the book, we can't recommend it enough as a kind of a cornerstone text to help explain the phenomena that we've been describing on the show, particularly in the last 6 to 8 show episodes. It is a kind of an instruction manual for the thinking that's involved in political totalitarian systems, and the pushback or the thought processes of individuals who are trying to maintain some semblance of their own humanity, their own grip on reality, that totalitarian systems seek to crush. So a very powerful film, and I think I'll open it up right there for further discussion.
Okay. I'd seen it several years ago. I'd seen it a couple times, and read the book a few times too. But it's been at least several years since I've seen the movie, and I'll just share a few observations about it. One thing that I remembered was that when I first saw it, I think I'd read the book once, and then seen the movie, probably as a teenager. And when I first saw it, my memory of it was that it was just very dark and drab and like not visually pleasing to look at, right? I thought, oh man, what a dirty place this is. And I hadn't picked that up from the book. The first time I'd read the book, I hadn't picked up on the like the depressed, like poverty level conditions essentially of what's going on and how shabby everything was. But then I eventually read the book again and saw that that's actually accurate. And one of the things that sticks out for me that I remember reading, someone commenting on the movie and it as an adaptation of the novel, and there apparently, I'd forgotten this scene. There's a scene where Winston, the main character, has his secret journal that he hides in his wall behind a brick in the movie, and I believe in the book, I can't remember if he hid it in a wall or not, but he had a piece of dust that was on the cover of his journal, and that's how he'd know if anyone had found it or not, because if that dust was removed, then he'd know that someone had found the journal and opened it and read it. And they were pointing out that just that image that a piece of dust could be used as a marker that everything was dusty, essentially. Everything was dirty. Mm-hmm. That's just one thing in the novel that gave that, but the movie is drab looking, it's shabby looking, it's depressing to just watch, to see the just the conditions that these main characters live in. And Winston Smith in the movie, he is a kind of like a low-level apparatchik, like party official. He's part of the outer party as opposed to the inner party. And so he's just one of the guys that works for the party, and his job is basically rewriting history. He gets directives and then looks at old articles and then changes them to meet the changing narratives that the party is putting forward. And so one of the main examples that they focus on in the movie is the party changing the chocolate ration. Mm-hmm. And I think, if I remember correctly, it had been the previous article had said it was going up to 30 grams or up to 35 grams. Maybe it was 30 to 35. And the directive changed, so now he had to go back and edit the old articles, and it wasn't 30 to 35, it was 20 to 25. And then the next day, once the news gets released, everyone's happy and says, oh, Winston, did you hear the good news? The chocolate ration's going up to 25 grams. And everyone's happy about it, even though they were either getting the same or more previously. But everything has to be presented in a positive light. And this constantly throughout the movie, because there are TV screens everywhere broadcasting party propaganda. And most of the propaganda is a listing of all the industrial achievements and outputs that the party is producing. This many tanks produced, this many fighter jets, this many blah, blah, blah. And it's a constant stream of statistics that are always positive and always moving in the right direction to give the people the impression that everything's going well, even though everything isn't going well. Mm-hmm. But the point I wanted to make about the look of the movie and the feel of the movie is there's that drab and shabby appearance, and we watched some of the special features and saw that one of the techniques they actually used to do that was that Radford originally wanted to film the movie in black and white, but they decided not to do that. I don't know if Roger Deakins, the cinematographer, I can't remember if he had any say in that or not. I think he would have liked to do it in black and white too, but he figured out that there was a technique to change the film stock, like the original print. Is that what the original, not the print, not the negative, but the print?
Positive. The
positive. There's basically a chemical technique. I think you just take it out of the solution, the chemical solution, partway through, mm-hmm. and it's essentially taking the full color of what it should be, and it reduces it in half, so it's halfway between black and white and halfway and color. So you get these muted tones that looks. So it is very it's like emotionally dulled, because the color is dull. It's emotionally dulled. So the whole film, the look of the film, puts you in the emotional state and mood that the characters are in, because in the movie, the characters in the movie, the entire society has their human emotions dulled, their range of expression and their range of experience dulled to within the limits of what the party says they should be. And there are a few things about the novel and the book and the film that they appear absurd at first sight because they are, and maybe not realistic, but that's even debatable, because I think the biggest absurdities that Orwell presents are actually do take place, and I'll give some examples. Well, one is the dictionary of Newspeak, because Newspeak is the language that the party dictates, which is essentially a truncated, amputated version of the English language, the elimination of words. And so Winston, as a party official with his job dealing with language, he's using the 9th edition of the Newspeak dictionary, and which is approximately that big, I think. And then the 10th edition comes out, and it's that big. And then one of his colleagues, I think Pearson was his name, or it might have been another guy, was talking about how great it's going to be for when the 11th edition comes out, and it's only going to be this big. It's going to have fewer words, because the fewer words, the better. And I can't remember, in the novel, Orwell gives a good party justification for the need and the good reasons for why English should be truncated. And basically it's by limiting the number of words, the range of words that people can use, you limit the number of things that they can think. When you eliminate enough language, then you will eliminate even the possibility of thought crime, of thinking the wrong thoughts. And this is actually very true. I don't know, this is one of the things I don't know if it has any actual historical precedent, but the concept is totally correct. He's getting across a reality through this fictional mechanism, through this fictional conceit of the truncation of a language, that actually does happen in practice, if not in actual form. Like I don't know if any government has actually gone about things in such a strategic and systematic way of reducing a language like that. I know that some things that have happened, for instance, Mao simplified Chinese characters to just that. And there of course are changes in language that happen. But one of the ways that this is shown in the movie, the effect of this, which I think was really effective, is by reducing a language like that, you reduce what people can think and what they can remember, what they can put into action. When you cut off concepts from people, those concepts are no longer active in their mind, in their imagination, in their creativity. They don't have access to them to the degree and the ease that a person with a normal vocabulary would. So when a concept is removed from a society, it makes it that much more difficult to access. And you see this in a few different ways in the movie. And one is when Winston's staying at this shabby apartment above a curio pawn shop type place selling just old junk. And there's a peasant or a working woman outside hanging up the laundry, and she's singing, and the guy that sells him a little glass thing with a coral in it. He points out a print of a cathedral in London, and do you remember the line that he says? It's oranges. What was it? Oranges something.
Oh,
I can't remember. But this old rhyme, like a traditional rhyme, and he hadn't heard of it before. He's like, "Well, where did you know that?" And he's like, "Oh, well, it's something old." And so they're cut off from their history, and this woman that he sees, she's singing, and he says, "Oh, it's so beautiful. I can't believe that a song that was produced by a machine could sound so beautiful." And I wonder even if the song was produced by a machine, if she was singing a propaganda song, or if she was just singing a traditional folk song, and he just assumed that it was written by a machine because all music is written by a machine. I don't know. But so you have a couple of these examples, but the one that really struck me the most was when he meets Julia, and they go out for the first time into the forest, and they have an initial conversation. Julia is a young party member who works for, I think, the porno department, which essentially creates escapist fiction and pornography for the lower class, for the proletariat, if I'm remembering correctly from the book. It's not really explained in detail in the movie. And so she's kind of a young activist. She's part of the kind of the elite of the young party members. She wears her red sash to show her what's the word for it? Chastity. So a lot of the young women have vowed not to have sex. And there's a push for artificial insemination, ARTSEM, and to totally eliminate to totally eliminate the family and interpersonal relationships, essentially, with the goal of eventually having a totally artificially conceived and birthed population. But when they first meet, he says, I guess he's kind of warning her about what he likes. He says, "Look, I hate purity. I hate goodness. I don't want virtue to exist anywhere. I want everyone corrupt." So she replies, "I ought to suit you then. I'm corrupt to the core." Now those are quite disturbing lines if taken at face value, until you understand what they actually mean. Purity doesn't mean purity. Goodness doesn't mean goodness. Virtue doesn't mean virtue. And corrupt doesn't mean corrupt. He hates the party's purity, which is the only purity he knows. He hates the party's goodness, which is the only goodness he knows. Same with virtue. And corruption, he wants everyone corrupt. Well, the only thing that's corrupt is what's against the party. He's basically saying he wants to be a human. And so she says, "Well, I had to suit you then. I'm corrupt to the core. I'm so corrupt that I'm actually a real human being, as opposed to what the party wants to create out of me." So right there, I think all of that is captured in just the image of the Newspeak dictionary and the truncation of concepts and words, which is essentially a truncation of human experience and an attempt to reform human nature in the image of what the party says it will be. And that is explicitly stated later on in the movie by the character O'Brien, who is an inner party member, who essentially traps or entraps Winston to expose him as a counter-revolutionary, a follower of Emmanuel Goldstein. And then the last part of the movie is the torture and re-education of Winston Smith. Now, I have stuff to say about that, but we can wait if you guys want to respond or go anywhere else first.
Yeah, I'll just throw in some stuff. I had not seen the movie before, so this was my first real delving into 1984. I've read bits and pieces of the book, but I never read the full thing. So I was able to come at this fresh and with really all of the current context of 1984 in mind, as far as what does Newspeak look like now? What does truncating the dictionary look like now? And just on that note, from a perspective not of because I don't know of anybody having actually truncated a dictionary for that purpose. I know that we don't have nearly as many words in the English dictionary as there used to be, but it wasn't malicious so far as I understand it. But there's certain words that you can't use in a certain context, which is very similar. And by that, I mean, taking as an example, Zionism. For a Zionist, you cannot criticize, the party, the Israeli lobby, AIPAC, what have you. So that's a very real example of how that plays out in the here and now. Then you have, all the other things like you can't. Well, and this ties in with the newspeak stuff because the newspeak would change. Like if I'm remembering correctly, some of the articles that were being revised by Winston were like not even that old, like a day, or maybe they were supposed to be coming out soon.
Several months, yeah. I didn't notice if there was one that recent.
Well, that's why I was wondering about the chocolate ration one because that was in his hand, and he was the one to change it to say it's going up as opposed to not changing. And then it was announced the next day. And then there was another thing that he had changed about the person who won like a chess tournament, and then somebody who got a posthumous award for valor or whatever it was, and that one also came out a couple of days after he had made the change. So it wasn't quite clear like how far back it was going, or if it was just like changing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it did. Each article did have a date on it, but I wasn't paying close enough attention to notice the time changes. But the impression I got was that the articles he was working at were previously published, maybe weeks or months ahead of time. Because I think I saw one that was like February 1984 or something, and the book or the events take place in I think like April and May, and so there was like a previous announcement that had been made, and then they retroactively change that announcement and then make a new announcement about the new news, which overrides the old news.
So that makes sense then. So they go ahead and basically pre-write the script for the coming weeks and months, and then as it gets closer, have somebody go in and edit it.
They'd actually published. It had been news, so everyone was expecting the chocolate ration to go up to like 35, and then a new article comes out saying it's going up to 25, and then they're all happy. So they were forced to forget or ignore in their minds that the ration was already announced to be going up to 35, and now they have to be happy with 25 and pretend that it was actually going up when actually it was going down.
Oh, and that's like this. That's the mind F of this whole thing. Like when we finished the movie, the first words out of my mouth was that was so effed. Just because it's so hard for a normal human being to do that kind of mental gymnastics, to contort their mind to this weird way of being that doesn't really like to where you don't exist, and the only thing that exists is the party, which is not how humans are set up. Which is another aspect of the whole removing individual personality, even to the point where the only thing left is the party. And that was something that O'Brien had said, was that if you cut people off from their family and you cut people off from their history, eventually the only thing left is the party. So it's a very intentional thing, but it's so insidious and just, oh God, it's so effed.
Well, so one of the ways in which this effed process, this mass gaslighting is conveyed is through these rallies at Victory Square, where you have the gigantic images of Big Brother and these propaganda films about various, production values and numbers that have gone up, as well as the war against Eurasia or East Asia, as the case may be. It constantly shifts. No, we're really at war with Eurasia. No, it's really East Asia.
We've always been at war with so-and-so and such and such.
Yes. And what you're watching is the hystericization of large numbers of people who are made to watch these pieces of propaganda on big screens. And there's this kind of incitement to turning off your mind and your thinking about what it is you're seeing, and fully indulging in the, death to Goldstein, death to Eurasia, the traitors, death. And so this fervor that's created in the minds of the propagandized, the outer party members who were, I guess, invited to these rallies, has the effect of shutting off their minds and completely kind of fostering a emotional connection to the propaganda that they've received. And this is borne out in the work that they do, which is sitting in these cubicles and these Kafkaesque rooms where they've become the ultimate technocratic pawns in revising news, in putting up posters for Big Brother, in going to committee meetings where they're being told why artificial insemination, the destruction of the family, is all for the good of the party. And made me think a little bit about all of the lies that we've been seeing from the kind of left-leaning media or the mainstream media in the past few years. And based on those lies, the hysterical attacks on anyone, particularly in social media, who would dare question the prevailing narrative. And whenever that prevailing narrative gets ultimately proven to be a false one, a lie, it just kind of disappears off of the radar of the mass consciousness of the population. You're on to the next big lie that is made to rile you up and is amplified, and so that sort of thing is one of the delicious gems about watching this film, is that you can see, if not an exact analogy, although there were some exact analogies, then you can see at least a metaphor or a correlation between what Orwell is saying in this story and events as they're unfolding in real time. And to discover these things for yourself, to see how insightful and relevant all of these scenes, all of these bits of dialogue are to the current day, is really, that's what excellent art is, in part. That's what it's designed to do. It should be a kind of a mirror held up to reality itself, and convey truths that might not otherwise be so well described as you might find in a work of nonfiction or a dry analysis of something. I wanted to read one quote. This is actually from the book. I don't recall it being stated in the film exactly, even though it's there in some form or another. And this is a speech by O'Brien, who is an inner party member and one of the kind of architects of the way Big Brother functions in 1984 in the story. He says, "Now I will tell you the answer to my question. It is this. The party seeks power entirely for its own sake. We are not interested in the good of others. We are interested solely in power, pure power. What pure power means you will understand presently. We are different from the oligarchies of the past in that we know what we are doing. All the others, even those who resembled ourselves, were cowards and hypocrites. The German Nazis and the Russian communists came very close to us in their methods, but they never had the courage to recognize their own motives. They pretended, perhaps they even believed, that they had seized power unwillingly and for a limited time, and that just around the corner there lay a paradise where human beings would be free and equal. We are not like that. We know that no one ever seizes power with the intention of relinquishing it. Power is not a means. It is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. Now you begin to understand me. So, how many times have we looked at power grabs and the perception management of events, particularly in the U.S., but in other places, that for all intents and purposes are incredible and successful attempts at accruing power? And it's just like O'Brien says in 1984, the revolution is being used to implement the dictatorship. We've said it before. Wokeism it's fake. It's a brand. It's a tool. It's a means to an end, and that end is for those who would use it and manipulate it on a mass scale, a weapon, a means to accrue power. And all you have to do is appropriate the terms of wokeism, put a few policies in place and executive orders, and there you have your own INCSOC. You have your own version of 1984 that you are implementing and actualizing step by step by step by step. So that's another one of the kind of central lessons to this that Orwell managed to see over 73, 74 years ago when he wrote this thing. And it's something to be considered quite seriously, because it's as though he tapped into a blueprint, a template for the ways in which totalitarian systems get created, the psychological dynamics that are involved, the political machinery that's in place, and it's also the reason, I think, in part, why 1984 has, in recent years, become a kind of revived in the minds of many people. Although we can talk about how it's been appropriated or misappropriated by different sides of the political spectrum in looking at it as a text to explain our reality.
The portrayal of O'Brien by Richard Burton was phenomenal. I mean, it was Anthony Hopkins, Silence of the Lambs level creepy and powerful. As he didn't use that exact speech, but he used bits and pieces in the movie. But it was so perfectly delivered. Just this, and this was something that the director, I think, said in the special features that he wanted Richard Burton to have this almost sympathetic aspect,
to be like kind. And
the
kind torturer.
The kind torturer that's slightly sympathetic as he tortures you to insanity, which was just freaking brilliant, and I think is pretty close to accurate in a lot of ways to how some of these people are and what they really think and look and act like. Is just
it's for your own good that we're doing this.
Well, I don't even know if it's so much for your own good, because he's a lot more cynical than that. I don't think he'd even use that as a line, because that's something that's a manipulation that you tell people in order to get them to do something. It's like, it's for your own good. No, it was like the quote that you read.
It's for
torture
power.
is for the purpose of power, and or for the purpose of torture. And this is something that stuck out for me watching the film this time, is that the first 2/3 of it, I think, is is pretty normal, and then he gets caught basically in the last act. And so for the first 2/3 of the movie, you're presented with a couple levels. Like, you're presented with the propaganda image, which is totally over the top and, like, you know, obviously a lie to an observer. But then you're given the reality of life. You see a bit of what the proles' life is like, a bit of the disdain that the party has for the proles, and then you get the life of Winston and these outer party members, and a glimpse of the inner party when Winston gets invited to O'Brien's office, which is immaculate, and he has wine, and he has to explain to Winston what wine is. And so you have this image, and it's disturbing but not horrifying. It basically just looks like a corrupt and impoverished society with a mendacity to it. So there's disturbing elements to it. But that all leads up to the arrest of Winston and Julia, where they're in the apartment that he's renting, and they hear basically an alarm, and the print of the cathedral falls off the wall, and there's the TV camera, the TV screen and camera. There's Big Brother watching them, and a voice starts giving them orders, and they're both naked. And then they get swarmed by the secret police. And from that moment on, it's like you're plunged into an even deeper level of hell than you were in for the whole part of the movie. And the way I saw that was to rephrase something you said, Ilan, about how kind of prescient Orwell was in presenting this blueprint. The way I'd put it is that he saw the essence of totalitarianism. And that is just pure psychopathy, because up until that point, there's still a mask, and it's all about the mask. It's all about, here's the image we want to project. Here's our propaganda. Here is the narrative we want to project. Here's how we're rewriting history. A total disdain for or disregard for truth and facts, like taking some guy that died in the war 15 years ago and then using his image as a war hero who just died in the war, a couple of weeks ago. Just creating reality out of nothing. And, creating a pseudo-reality out of nothing. And then they're arrested, and they get taken to the prison. And it follows Winston from then on. And like I said, it's just a lower depth of hell from then on that is totally stripped of any mask of sanity. And this is so when Orwell is putting words into O'Brien's mouth, like the one about all previous attempts and even the people that looked like us haven't realized the truth, he's importing into O'Brien the essence of the situation, what it actually is, even if it's never stated outright. He's saying this is the reality behind it. This is what's really going on. And one of the things that he says, there's a whole bunch of great lines in his interactions with Winston as he's torturing him.
Mm-hmm.
And one is this. He says, "No one escapes, Winston. There are no martyrs here. All the confessions made here are true. We do not destroy the heretic because he resists us. As long as he resists us, we never destroy him. We make him one of ourselves before we kill him. We make his brain perfect before we blow it out." And there are a number of disturbing lines like that O'Brien has. And this is one of those things, it's kind of like the 2 + 2 = 5. Like 2 + 2 = 5, it's one of those things that you think is so absurd that he's trying to just make a point out of it, until you realize that there are actually people like that. And there has been a whole discussion on Twitter over the last year of critical math theorists trying to argue that 2 + 2 can equal 5. That the laws of math and the laws and rules and practice of math are simply a racist, white supremacist construction, and there's no actual objectivity. And they wouldn't say that exactly, but they'd say that there are situations where 2 + 2 = 5, which is a direct quote from O'Brien, who says sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 3, Sometimes it's everything at all, everything at once.
Mhm.
But so this revelation, this like stripping of the veils, this removal of the mask of sanity, while maybe in reality is unrealistic, it makes sense in this fictional context, because the fiction, I think the purpose of fiction is to show the truth. So he's just like with the Newspeak dictionary. Orwell is showing you the truth of the situation with an example that might not be totally congruent to what would actually happen in the world, but by divining the essence of the situation, he's able to present it with this, like in this stark reality, and all of a sudden it doesn't become that much more like unbelievable. It becomes more believable, even if it would never manifest with such a, like, in such an ideal type. Even if there was no party that would explicitly say things the way that O'Brien does, but the level of, well, all I can say is that O'Brien's philosophy is pure psychopathy. It's psychopathy without any shame about presenting itself as it is. And watching that scene, and particularly that quote that I just read, in addition to a number of the other ones in the last bit of the film, reminded me of a couple of things that I just read, like the night before in Political Ponerology. So Lobachevsky's talking about pathocracy, which is his name for a totalitarian system. So the system, the party system in 1984 is a pathocracy, or that's what Lobachevsky would call it. I'll read a paragraph first of him describing what a pathocracy is, or at least one feature of it. He says, in a pathocracy, all leadership positions, down to village headman and community cooperative managers, not to mention the directors of police units, special services personnel, police personnel, and activists in the pathocratic party, must be filled by individuals with corresponding psychological deviations, which are inherited as a rule. And by inherited, in that situation, in that context, he means a personality disorder. After such a system has lasted several years, 100% of all cases of essential psychopathy are involved in pathocratic activity. They are considered the most loyal, even though some of them were formerly involved on the other side in some way. Under such conditions, no area of social life can develop normally, whether in economics, culture, science, technology, administration, etc. Pathocracy progressively paralyzes everything, progressively intrudes everywhere, and dulls everything. That's why that one of those first observations I made about just the color of the movie I thought was so accurate, is that in a situation like that, like your human nature, your human feeling, the capacity for feeling is dulled. And that's portrayed visually in just the color of the film. And then the quote that leads to, that I was reminded of when listening to O'Brien, again in reference to pathocracy, Lobachevsky writes, the goal of pathocracy, I'll rephrase it, or I'll reorganize the sentence. The goal is never openly admitted. And that goal is forcing human minds to incorporate pathological experiential methods and thought patterns, and consequently accepting such rule. The goal is conditioned by pathological egotism, and the possibility of accomplishing it strikes the pathocrats as not only indispensable, but feasible. Thousands of activists must therefore participate in this work. However, time and experience confirm what a psychologist may have long foreseen. The entire effort produces results so very limited that it is reminiscent of the labors of Sisyphus. The authors and executors of this program are incapable of understanding that the decisive factor making their work difficult is the fundamental nature of normal human beings, the majority. So what Lobachevsky is essentially saying is that O'Brien's goal, and what he actually achieves with Winston, is impossible. In the long run, impossible. Maybe in the long run impossible, or maybe even impossible. Like maybe maybe he would even say that the very scenario of 1984 itself and what happens to Winston is impossible. I don't know, but there's that, which is kind of a positive thing, that human nature is so instinctual, because it's human nature, that there are certain limits past which, like, you can't push it. There are certain obstacles that you run up against when you try to shape human minds in the way you want them to be. You can't turn 100% of the population into psychopaths. It just doesn't work. There will be a susceptible portion of the population that will have their minds like corrupted to a certain degree, but there will always be another significant part of the population that can't be influenced and affected to that degree. But what Orwell is showing is that this is the goal. Mm-hmm. This is actually what they want to do, and that's what O'Brien says. Well, his philosophy is that the human mind is infinitely malleable. We can do anything we want with your mind. And that's why he says that, one of the reasons that he says that we never kill heretics. First we turn them into one of us, and then we shoot them in the head. And that is, so it's a taking off of the mask of sanity, is that this is the way that pathocrats, that the party sees human beings, as these malleable creatures that they can turn into images of themselves, and there's nothing that any of us can do about it. And so, like Winston, they see us as just these animals, like they say about the proles, like O'Brien says about the proles, that they're just animals, and they need to be lied to, and basically we need them to do work for us. And it's a completely cynical view of human nature and of humanity, and that those aspects of the philosophy are what underlies social justice, like critical social justice theory, what underlies critical theory. The idea, it is a relativistic philosophy that there is no truth, that there is no human nature, minds are malleable, that biology is malleable, that biology maybe doesn't even exist. It's a social construction, this social constructivist view of reality that the only reason we are the way we are is because society made us that way. So if we change society, we can reshape humanity into whatever image we want. And that's the philosophy of the party in 1984, and that's the philosophy of the social justice theorists today. The social justice theorists haven't achieved power to the degree that the party has in 1984, but through the long march through the institutions, they're getting there. They are in all of the institutions. They're in the schools, from like K to 12 to university to postgrad studies, all education, all major corporations, and even like medium-sized corporations, businesses, the politics. They're all over politics, and it's pretty, like, it seems pretty much inescapable now. And yeah, I'll just leave that there.
Well, there's two things that I wanted to say. The first one, just to interject, a very recent development was from Hasbro, the children's toy company, who came out and said that they're no longer going to be making a Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head because that's restricting children's ability to reflect their own experiences and to create same-sex families and blah, blah, blah. So that is like just how insidious this is at this moment.
Which is ridiculous, because Mr. Potato Head, you can change what they're wearing and what faces they have. Mr. Potato Head is like the perfect trans toy, I'd think.
Yeah, because you can just take it and, yeah, like you said, like, take the ears off of Mrs. Potato Head and put it on Mr. Potato Head because it's funny seeing him with earrings and the top hat. So that was one thing. The other thing that I wanted to mention was the changing of history with Newspeak, how they said that, one day, we were at war with Eurasia. We've always been at war with Eurasia. And the next day it was, we're at war with East Asia. We've always been at war with East Asia. And doing the retroactive change of history. Well, we can see that today with some of the changing of what is and is not acceptable speech. Was it somebody in some position had, I can't remember where, but they had a somewhat racist tweet 15 years ago. This was like a head of Black Lives Matter or something like that. Again, this was very recent, who had to resign because of this tweet, 15 years ago. I didn't look it up to see what it actually was, but because it probably would have been innocuous. But what's acceptable today will not be acceptable tomorrow. And so we have to look back to yesterday to make sure that we conform to the standards of today. And it's that weird warping of history and what is and isn't acceptable that is a direct transplantation of like 1984 concepts into reality.
Well, one of the quotes that speaks directly to that is, every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statue and street building has been renamed, every date has been altered, and the process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. And I was thinking about the 2 + 2 = 4 bit of dialogue, and how this Common Core system of teaching math came into existence and prominence about 8 or 10 years ago, which is, according to all accounts by veteran educators, completely confusing and ass backwards. And even Bill Gates, who had in some way been supportive of Common Core, came out and said, "Oh, well, yeah, I guess that it didn't work as well as we would have liked." But the damage has been done. You've had years of Common Core indoctrination. 2 + 2 = 5.
Well, let's just not even like buy into his bullshit. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it intentionally.
Yes. And getting back to that quote, because the 2 + 2. Well, you know what? I actually, even more important than that, something that you had mentioned a little bit ago, Harrison, about the lack of power that the pathocracy has ultimately to squash humanity, or the spirit of humanity. There's a moment where O'Brien and Winston are in the torture room, room 101, and Winston actually says, you won't succeed. You ultimately will not be able to do what you set out to do. And O'Brien just continues his kind of oppressive language and programming that he wants Winston to accept. And I think it bears mentioning that a lot of this kind of force of malevolence that we've seen is conveyed almost on a metaphysical level. There are foreshadowings of the confrontation that O'Brien and Winston have towards the end of the film, that are just presented, and they kind of exist outside of the space and time of the narrative to suggest that these things are already in motion. These ideas of psychological and spiritual oppression are already there, even if they haven't been fully implemented. And there's a scene where O'Brien uses a very specific way of scaring the crap out of Winston. that that is very personal, that only O'Brien, as this kind of powerful figure in the party, could have some knowledge of, some insight about Winston to be able to use against him, to be able to torture him with. And it suggested to me that, there, all of this has this kind of negative power or force that isn't only designed to work on this macro level, but also kind of penetrates deep into the psyche of individuals, or attempts to, on a very deeply personal level. The tagline to the movie Poltergeist in 1982 was, it knows what scares you, right? So this O'Brien is this kind of almost, calm, fatherly, demonic figure. He is demonic, except that he's so controlled and so knowledgeable that he's able to pinpoint that very thing that he thinks is going to help to break Winston. And the ending is debatable as to whether or not he succeeded, or maybe not debatable. We can get into that here. But it's interesting to me that the film also speaks to almost apolitical, non-propagandistic means to dig its teeth into an individual's very being, into the darkest recesses of their deepest fears, and penetrate them and twist them and turn them around for the direction of the party.
Yeah. I think that's all I have to say about it. Maybe a final thought, just an interesting thing, maybe to wrap up, if you guys want to, unless you guys want to go further, about the film itself, which was really cool, was that it was filmed in April and May of 1984, which was when the book takes place. And there was even one scene that they managed to film, apparently just by happenstance, on the same day that it occurred in the book. So it's kind of it was almost like the fates lined up to create this movie back then, the year of my birth. Even the story of how it got there, like Radford wrote the script in like 3 weeks. He had like 5 weeks to write the script in order to get funding, and managed to write the script, and then got Richard Branson,
Mm-hmm.
the Virgin Records guy,
Mm-hmm.
to fund it, and he's just like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll fund it. And so it got thrown together, and was completely all this. There's no special effects in the film. It's all in-camera effects, so everything's practical. Everything that you see was actually done, maybe with a camera technique or trick for 1 or 2 scenes, but everything is real that you see. There's no green screens. There's nothing chopped in. It was all filmed as you see it. And one of the things that stuck out from the special features, from the interviews, was that in the crowds at the beginning, when they have the 3 minutes hate? How many minutes is it? 5 minutes hate? Was they had a crowd of like 1,000 extras in this exploded out, what was it, a BBC building or a
Mm-hmm.
So this wide open building, which wasn't very structurally sound, but they managed to make it work. So they had all these people in there, and I think the director Radford said that they had all these people, and with these hysterical screams and letting letting that rage come out of them. And he says after every take there would be like 10 people who had passed out and couldn't do it any longer. And it was amazing for him to see that even though they were acting, even though this was fake, they were pretending, the effect of having that many people get on that emotional level at the same time was enough to shut several people down on a very basic level. So they're even pretending to do something like that, it has an effect on the actual biology, the physiology of the people involved. So imagine what it's like, what that very same process does in reality. That I think that's just an example of Orwell getting something right, which is kind of, I mean, you don't have to be a genius to get that right, but just the madness of crowds, just the strength of those, the emotion of crowds and getting caught up in group hysteria is very strong, and that is a technique. It's a deliberate, cynical exploitation of human nature for the purposes of the people exploiting that fact. So, a recommended movie. Yeah, like Alon said earlier, we should definitely watch it. There aren't very many. There are plenty of movies that have like evil Russians in them, of course, right? Because of the history of the Cold War. There are plenty of movies about Nazism and like conditions in Nazi Germany. There are very few movies that actually are about communism or socialism. And 1984 is one of them, even though it's essentially science fiction. We talked about Mr. Jones last week, which is one of the few other ones. There are several in other languages. There are several I'll say that, there are several foreign language films like Lives of Others. But very oddly, there are very few American movies that are actually critical of communism, even though there are tons of movies with evil Russians in them, which is kind of strange. So maybe we'll find all of the movies that exist and talk about them, because there aren't very many in the future. But yeah, any final thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, just that there have been a number of movies that and books that have been kind of brought into public awareness recently and referred to in use. There's also It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, and I've seen or read most of the books or adaptations of these stories, but I would say this is easily one of, if not the most powerful. Just a note that it seems to me that Alan Moore's V for Vendetta also owes a debt to 1984, even if it takes a more kind of right-wing version of this phenomena in a future dystopian version of the United Kingdom and England, and does it very well, as I'm sure a lot of...
It's got John Hurt in it, too.
And it's got John Hurt in it. Actually, that's right. He's playing the O'Brien. You're right. And it does a very good job of it. So that was a bit of brilliant casting on the part of the producers of V for Vendetta. We're going to link to the show notes an article called New York Times Calls on the Biden Administration to Appoint a Reality Czar to help solve our, quote, reality crisis, unquote, which was a New York Times article that was put out just a few weeks ago. So the comments that the SOD editor put on it and the ideas that are being put forth in this New York Times article speak a lot to exactly what 1984 has been trying to explain to us, and so I think that'll be a good read for anyone who's paying attention to this story.
But then one last thing, there have been articles in previous weeks on how people are misusing the word Orwellian when, which is it's a totally Orwellian article, because people are using Orwellian correctly, and here's this Orwellian article saying that people aren't using it correctly, and it's kind of taking 1984 and squaring it. They're making 2 and 2 equal 5 by trying to appropriate the word Orwellian to make it mean something they want it to mean. They're turning it into newspeak so that people can't see that that they themselves are the Orwellian party.
Well, that's it, everybody. We hope you enjoyed the show. We encourage you to read the book, watch the film, and thanks for listening. Take care, everyone.